and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. Today's video is going to be a good one for you free-to-play players and low spenders. I have picked 10 non-void epic champions that I have personally built across several accounts that I think are great champions for you to consider taking to 6-star. You're going to get a lot of value out of these champions. You can use them in the early game, the mid game, and a lot of them in the late game. And they are game changers for a lot of accounts. They're going to provide you with a lot of value. Now, don't just automatically build one of the 10 on the list here because you happen to have it. Make sure that it serves a purpose that you need, right? In order to progress, you don't want to like double up or triple up on rolls. You want to spread your first, 10 or 20 6-stars into different areas of the game so that you can be hitting all the different locations for all the different resources that you need, whether it's dungeons, clan boss, Doom Tower, Iron Twins, whatever it is that you need in order to progress. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Like I said, these are 10 that I have personally built. I have not built every epic in the game. There are other epics people love and talk about that I may not talk about. These are not necessarily the 10 best, but they are 10 valuable champions. I chose non-void epics because I wanted it to be as free-to-play friendly as possible. And I think that one of the things that happens on a free-to-play account, at least in my experience, is that epics play a central role in your account progression, especially in the first, say, 6 to 8 months of your account. And the reason is pretty simple. I'll jump into the tavern here and show you, even at this point in time, I've been playing more than 2 years. This is a free-to-play account. You can see that I have many more epic tomes than legendary tomes. Now, we've had a CVC going on. I've just spent about 25 epic tomes and only about 3 legendary tomes during this CVC. So I actually had somewhere around 80 epic tomes and about 32 legendary tomes. And that's fairly typical. Over time, what's going to happen is you're going to get somewhere between twice as many and 3 times as many epic tomes as legendary tomes. So it makes sense that you would have twice as many or 3 times as many epic champions at 6-star than you would have legendary champions at 6-star. Now, there are champions that you can get value out without booking. There's one on the list today that I'm definitely going to point out. And so that can skew the numbers a little bit, but the vast majority of champions are really more valuable when they're fully booked or at least partially booked. So I've picked 10 that I think have proven valuable in my time playing Raid and that I think you should consider. Again, consider, not automatically build, but consider. Okay, so let's get started. Number 10, by the way, these are not in order of value necessarily. I think that the later ones in the list are probably the ones that are more valuable in the late game, and the ones at the beginning of the list are a little bit more valuable early game, but they will all continue to be valuable throughout the game. You will always find upgrades for champions. That will happen, and so you may replace specific champions and not use them again. But these can continue to have value in Doom Tower secret rooms. They can have value in faction crypts. They can have value in spot usages in other places, whether that's Hydra boss or Doom Tower bosses or things like that. All right, so first champion here is Fenchy in the Shadowkin faction. This guy is a great epic, and he is your solution to Fire Knight, especially early on, but he can also double up as an amazing clan boss damage dealer. So he really fills those 2 roles. He can do well against the dragon. He's great against dragon. So you can definitely use him in multiple spots. He will continue to be useful against some Doom Tower bosses as well. So he definitely has more than just one usage. I think most people think of him as a Fire Knight specialist, but he is not. He is perfect for Fire Knight, by the way. He is a great Fire Knight damage dealer. You will need another damage dealer as a wave clearer because he is primarily single target. He's entirely single target. But let's get to his kit and show you exactly what makes him so good. So first of all, his A1 is fantastic. It's a triple hitter, and each hit has a 40% chance when booked of placing the decreased speed, the large decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Having a decreased speed debuff on your A1 is actually really valuable, and this is a triple hitter. Triple hitters, if you have multiple hits, if you average more than 2 hits per turn, you want to think about Giant Slayer Mastery versus War Master Mastery. because you get multiple opportunities to land those big HP based hits. So I'll just show you that real quickly. Go to any champion, just go to masteries, and you go down here and you can see, okay, so this is War Master, has a 60% chance of inflicting bonus damage, and that would be equal to 4% of the target's max HP if it's a boss. But it can only happen once per skill. Now, Giant Slayer is the same thing, has a lower chance, 30% chance, and it does less damage, 3% of the target's max HP, but it can occur on each hit of a skill. So there's potential to land this up to 3 times on Fenchy's A1 versus only 1 time on a War Master. So the basic rule of thumb is if you can get more than an average of 2 hits per turn, you go with Giant Slayer. Although I honestly think the number's a little bit higher, it's about 2.5. But that being said, Fenchy is a perfect candidate for Giant Slayer because of his multi-hit skills. So his A2 is also a 3-hitter. This skill has a 75% chance when booked of decreasing the target's turn meter by 15% for each hit. So you could decrease the turn meter by up to 45%. Now, the best version of this type of skill tends to be the A1, like the A1 that Vizix has, or the A1 that Armagur has, or the A1 that Allure has, or some other champions, where you get turn meter on every A1. You could turn off the other skills and just make the A1 go, and you have guaranteed turn meter reduction. This is actually maybe the second best version of the skill because it's actually on a 2-turn cooldown when fully booked. So even though this isn't, you can't use this every single turn, you can use this every other turn, and it is 45% of turn meter reduction, potentially. You know, obviously, it's rare that you're going to hit all 3 of those. You're much more likely to hit 1 or 2. But on average, you're going to probably be reducing, you know, the turn meter by about 30% per application of this skill. It's really rare, by the way, to find any skill in the game with a 2-turn cooldown. So this is actually pretty amazing that this is a 2-turn cooldown skill. All right, and then you have the third skill. And the third skill is also a 2-hitter, but each hit places a 5% poison debuff on the target for 3 turns. Now that's 3 turns, okay? This is on a 3-turn cooldown. So that means you are guaranteed, if you have enough accuracy, to land, and you don't weak hit, to land 2 poison debuffs basically permanently, because every time you go, you're going to put them back up. So they're up for 3 turns, and every 3 turns you put them back up, okay? So this is where he becomes really good for Clan Boss. He's a poisoner, but in addition to that, he will ignore 10% of the target's defense for each poison debuff on the target. So if you are going faster than the boss, you can potentially increase that number of poisons. So let's say you're on a 2-to-1 team. Now that means that every 3 turns you're putting up 2 poisons, but then you're going twice. You know, you're doing 6 turns for every 3 turns of the boss. And so you're going to get 4 of these up. And so now you're going to be ignoring 40% of the clan boss's defense. If you've got another poisoner on the team, right, you can potentially get 5, 6, maybe 7 poisons up. Obviously, you still want weaken, you still want drop defense. So you're going to have at least those other debuffs up there. And there's a maximum of 10 debuffs so you can put up. So you're not going to be ignoring 100% of the clan boss's defense with this skill. However, if you can get Fenchy in a Savage set where he's ignoring 25% of defense based on that, or you can, work with some of the blessings that would increase, so you have blessings, you have blessings that reduce target's defenses, you have a chance to get to 100% of ignoring the target's defense, ignoring 100% of the target's defense. There are very, very few champions in the game that can ignore 100% of the target's defense or even get close without crazy things happening, right? So this guy works really well to do damage through poisons. He also works really well just to do direct damage by ignoring defense, okay? Plus you get those Giant Slayer procs, right? So you have all of those on top of the poisons and the ignoring defense. This guy hits hard. He hits really, really hard. He is great for Fire Knight, great for Dragon, great for Clan Boss, and you'll also find a couple of other uses for him in Doom Tower and Faction Wars. Okay, so Fenchy's awesome. Let's go to the next one on the list. And the next one on the list is in the Knights Revenant faction. So this is Rector Drath. Now, Rector Drath is a support hero. She's a phenomenal support hero. You're definitely going to want to build her for Faction Wars regardless of anything else. You might be able to get away with her at 5 stars if you have decent gear on her in the Faction Crypt. But she is a reviver, and you always want a reviver on your team in Faction Crypts. She is a single target reviver, but she has a very good single target revive. So she revives a single ally with 60% HP and 60% turn meter. Both are above average. And then she places a perfect veil on them for 3 turns. Now, perfect veil is a damage reduction buff, and it also makes it impossible for an enemy to target that champion with a single target ability. They can still get hit by AoEs, but that makes them harder to target, basically. So a very good revive. Also on the A1 has a chance of placing a decreased attack, which is good against bosses. The heal is very strong. On a 4-turn cooldown, heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. So if you build her with a lot of HP, she's going to have a huge heal. After healing, places a perfect veil buff for 2 turns on all allies with full HP. This is actually a heal you use even when your allies have full health, because it gives them that perfect veil, and then it places a continuous buff on them if they don't have 100% health. But if they do, they get that perfect veil. And then this also works well with the passive. Whenever an ally under a veil or perfect veil buff gets a turn, heals them by 10% of their max HP. So everybody with a veil or perfect veil, every time they go, they get healed. So she can put the veil on them, and then she continues to heal them. Now, if they drop below 100%, they still have their veil, they're going to get healed. Okay. Also, it increases the resistance of allies under veil or perfect veil by 50. She is great against Hydra because of this. You can boost the resistance of your entire team. You can also mitigate damage for your entire team because of that perfect veil. You can also heal your entire team because of the heal and the passive. So you got like actually 3 sources of healing. You have the A2, which is a heal. You've got the continuous heal from the A2, which is also a heal. And then you've also got the passive heal that comes from the perfect veil. So you have healing going everywhere, the decrease attack, the revive. And then you can even use her as a resistance lead in Doom Tower. She's got 55 resistance for all allies, which is not bad. There are definitely some bosses in Doom Tower you may want this particular aura for. So fantastic champion. Definitely take her to 5 stars, but seriously consider taking her to 6 stars. I want her on my free-to-play challenge account for 2023. She would fit in perfectly, and she is a great solution for Clan Boss. She's a great solution for Hydra. She's a great solution for just progression in Doom Tower, in dungeons, because she just does so much for your team. Great support. Okay. The third champion is in the High Elves faction. And you have probably heard about this champion before, but this is Royal Guard. You may have heard about some of these champions before, of course. But these are just the ones that I've found to be game changers on my various accounts, like I said. Royal Guard is a phenomenal champion. He has limitations, unlike, say, Rector Drath, where you can use her basically everywhere. Royal Guard is more like Fenchy, where he's a specialist. He has specific uses where he's really, really strong, and then other places you don't want to use him. For instance, Royal Guard is just not an arena champion. You don't want to use him in arena. However, he's got a great kit for killing bosses, especially Hydra boss. In Hydra Clan Boss, he is one of the best damage dealers. He's definitely one of the 2 best epic damage dealers in the game for Hydra Clan Boss. Okay, so his A1 has a 65% chance of placing a decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Decreased defense is always great against bosses. His A2 hits based on enemy max HP. Enemy max HP hits tend to be the largest hits in the game against bosses. So you have a clan boss who's got a massive health pool, and now hitting for a percentage of that health pool is just more damage than anybody else can do. So this is actually an AoE enemy max HP hit, which is why he's so good against Hydra. Okay, his A3 is also really nice. It attacks 4 times at random, which I don't love, but each hit has a 60% chance, which actually books up to a 75% chance of placing a decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Each hit also has a 75% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 25%. This makes him usable against a lot of bosses. Any bosses that can get a decreased speed or decreased turn meter, this skill is really good for. It's not great for waves necessarily because it's a random hit, so you don't know who the decreased speed is going to land on or if it's going to land. But this is great for Fire Knight. This is great for some Doom Tower bosses where that decreased speed is going to be really valuable. And also the decreased turn meter. So for instance, Scarab Boss is a really good example. Royal Guard is good against Scarab Boss. So anyway, that's, to round out his kit, that's what you've got there. And then he increases ally attack in dungeons by 35%, which is a high percentage to increase ally attack, but it is only in dungeons. You could use him as a dungeon lead. You're probably going to use a speed aura instead. But if you don't have a speed aura, this is going to allow him to do even more damage. So he hits really hard, and he's a great champion. Our 4th champion is in the Lizardman faction, and it is Venom Mage. Now, opinion on Venom Mage tends to be split, at least amongst content creators. Some content creators like him, some love him. Some are, not convinced that Venom Mage is as good as other people claim. I have found personally that Venom Mage is just amazing. It's been my experience. Now, you do have to build a team around Venom Mage that works with Venom Mage, but let me walk you through the kit. So first of all, the A1 is not simple, but it's fairly direct. Attacks one enemy 2 times, destroys the target's max HP by 75% of the damage inflicted if they are under a heal reduction debuff. Now, Venom Mage brings a heal reduction debuff, so that's likely to happen a lot. Destroying max HP is not a super useful skill in many places, but it does offer some extra utility in specific fights that Venom Mage is going to be good for. Each hit also has a 50% chance when booked of activating up to 2 poison debuffs on the target. So this is a poison activator. So if there's a poison out there, when you activate it, that means it goes off as if it had been the enemy's turn. So let's say you put a poison debuff up for 2 turns on the clan boss. The clan boss takes their turn, the poisons proc, and then Venom Mage hits them with the A1 and can proc them again. And that will take a counter of the poison, so the poisons would come off. But basically, you're hitting twice as many poisons as you would be otherwise, as long as you can keep the poisons up. And that's where the debate on Venom Mage is. You need a second poisoner to really have those poisons up there so that Venom Mage can activate them. Now, the A2 has a 100% chance of placing decreased defense and a 100% chance of placing decreased attack if the target is under a poison debuff. That is great for clan boss. Obviously, both decreased defense and decreased attack are really important. Not if you have an unkillable team. Venom Mage is really built for a killable or traditional clan boss team. So you're going to want to speed tune a team that can survive more than 50 turns. And that's where Venom Mage is really going to come into his power. Okay, the A3 attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance of placing the heal reduction for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, so you should have that up 100% of the time. Obviously, accuracy is an important part of this kit. Also has a 100% chance of placing 2 poison debuffs for 2 turns on the 3-turn cooldown. So, Venom Mage does place poisons, but probably not enough poisons. That's why you're going to need that second poisoner to help Venom Mage out and make sure that those poisons stay up. Another option, by the way, instead of going with another poisoner, is you could have a debuff extender. And as long as the debuff extender is going faster than Venom Mage, generally they will extend those poisons before Venom Mage can burn them, by activating. Okay, and then this is the passive that really seals the deal in terms of Venom Mage being great for clan boss in a killable comp. Enemies under heal reduction debuffs inflict 15% less damage. That's just 15% of damage off the top. Okay, so the way you build a killable clan boss team is by having skills and gear that allow you to survive for a very long time. So ally protect is really important. Strengthen is really important. Increased defense is really important. And then additional mitigations that you can get from other sources are really important. This is literally 15% damage off the top. So this is an incredible amount of mitigation that you can't replicate from another source, right? So put Venom Mage in a killable team, put him with somebody else who maybe increases defense or has another damage mitigation passive like this, and all of a sudden it becomes a very powerful way to extend that fight beyond 50 turns. All right, so this is one of my favorite champions in the game, and I think he's constantly overlooked and undervalued. People realize he's a good champion, but I don't think they value him for as much as they should. And that's a Duke the Pierced. All right, first of all, this guy has an amazing kit. He really does have an amazing kit. And the thing about his kit and his stats is that everything synergizes with everything else. And so what you have here is you have a champion who like has no fat in their kit. There's no extra fluff. It's all usable stuff, and it all reinforces each other. So maybe the weakest part of the kit is the A1, which is not a weak skill, by the way. It's actually a pretty good skill, but I think the rest of the kit is a little bit more impressive. And because people look at this A1 and they say, well, it's a decreased accuracy, they don't necessarily think of how powerful it can be. So it's a 2-hitter. Each hit has a 40% chance when booked of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Decreased accuracy is the equivalent, like if you land a decreased accuracy on an enemy, say a boss, that's the equivalent of doubling your entire team's resistance. So from a stat perspective, this is one of the most powerful debuffs in the game, right? Because basically you just cut the accuracy in half. That's incredible. So even though it only has uses in specific places, where it does have a use, it's incredibly powerful. The A2 attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance of placing decreased attack and decreased defense for 2 turns on each critical hit. This is on a 3-turn cooldown. So you will need to build Duke with 100% critical rate and 100, you need to build with enough accuracy to land the debuffs. So he is a bit stat hungry, which I think makes, turns people off. So you're definitely going to need to build him with good gear. But just keep that in mind. Okay, this is an amazingly powerful skill, great for clan boss, great for a lot of places. Decrease attack and decrease defense. You can use this in arena. You can use this in wave content. You can use this against every boss. There is no place where this skill doesn't play. Okay, the A3, I actually think, is the thing that locks him in as a great champion. And this places a provoke debuff for 1 turn on a target enemy. And then it has a 75% chance of placing a provoke debuff on 2 random enemies. So you can provoke up to 3 enemies. Now, an AoE provoke would be better, definitely. So there is that. But I actually think this is really powerful because you get to pick your provoke. And that's a guaranteed, right? Places a provoke debuff on 1 turn on a target enemy. It's not a hit, so you can't weak hit. You can just place a provoke debuff. If you have enough accuracy, it will land. And that's also true of the other 2 provokes. As long as the 75% rolls and you have enough accuracy, you will land a provoke debuff on 2 other enemies. Now, this makes Duke really good for Hydra Clan Boss. He's got the A2 that is perfect for Hydra Clan Boss. He's got the A1, which is perfect for Hydra Clan Boss. And he's got the A3, which is also perfect for Hydra Clan Boss. The second part of this skill, he places a 30% reflect damage buff on this champion for 2 turns and an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn. That's a pretty cool skill as well. So when he gets hit, he's going to be reflecting some of that damage. An amazing champion. He is defensive based. So the more survivable you build him, the harder he's going to hit. So this is a really amazing champion. The most comparable champion to him in the game is Stag Knight in the Bannerlords faction. Stag Knight's a phenomenal champion. I actually personally feel that Duke's a little bit better. Some people might argue that Stag Knight is a little bit better. There's certainly an argument to be made, but they're both excellent champions. And I think Stag Knight gets talked about a lot and Duke gets overlooked a lot. So that's why I wanted to bring him up. Okay. Our next champion, champion number 6, is back to the Knights Revenant faction. And this is one of the few champions that I think just everybody in the game should build to 6 stars and run at some point. and that is Doom Priest. Doom Priest has a almost unique skill, a very unusual skill. There are only 2 champions in the game that have a passive like this. Heals all allies by 7.5% of their HP and removes 1 random debuff from them at the start of this champion's turn. So every time she gets a turn, she removes a debuff from the whole team. This can't be prevented, right? Like if you stun Doom Priest, she still uses this skill because it's a passive. It's not an active skill. It doesn't require her to not be stunned. She just needs to get a turn. So as soon as her turn comes around, she heals everybody and she removes a random debuff. This is an amazingly powerful skill, and you do not need to book this champion at all to get the full value of this skill. In fact, booking her is almost pointless. She gets a little bit of extra damage on her A1, but she hits like a wet noodle, so it's not really going to matter. And then on her A2, she places an increased attack. So if you want the increased attack to be on a 3-turn cooldown, that would be worth 1 book, but that's literally the only time you would ever need 1 book. However, worst case scenario, if you do book her out, it's only 5 books. Most champions take a lot more than 5 books. So my hope is, on your first or second or third book, you would hit the A2, and then you wouldn't have to waste any more books on the A1. Her passive is increases force ally speed in all battles by 15%, which is rarely used. You will use it occasionally. I think there is a force epic secret room in Doom Tower for which she is actually perfectly suited, and you may use her as a speed lead in that, but otherwise you're probably not going to use her aura very much. Amazing champion, definitely worth everybody building the 6-star at some point. Whether or not you need her right now is, you'll have to decide. But definitely worth it. I've never regretted building my Doom Priest. You can run her at 5 stars for a while, but there will be some fights where you're going to want her at 6 stars. She is good in Hydra. She is good in Doom Tower. She is good in a lot of places. You can even kind of spot use her in places where maybe she's not optimal, but you don't have another good champion for that spot. Like I have used her in Spider before. I've used her in, Dragon before. I've used her in Iron Twins before. I don't think she's optimal in those places, but sometimes she does a job that nobody else can really do, and you can build her very survivably. You just build her fast and with a lot of defense and HP, and you're good to go. Okay, we are up to number 7 in the Demon Spawn faction, and that is Magnar. Now, Magnar is one of the best arena nukers in the game. I would say, maybe he's 9th or 10th, something like that. Maybe there have been so many good nukers added to the game in the last 6 months that he's probably been knocked out of the top 10. But as far as epics go, he's one of the top 3 epic nukers for arena in the game. And he's the only one that's not a void champion. So he is probably, I would say, the best non-void epic or rare nuker in the game, at least for arena. And it's all based on this. It's based on this A2. Attacks all enemies, places an extra hit on enemies without HP burn debuffs. Has a 50% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn on enemies under HP burn debuffs. So just make sure that you don't bring an HP burner, and he's going to place 2 hits, and this skill hits very hard. His damage is based on HP, so you can build him very survivably with a lot of HP, and he'll hit harder because of that. Most HP hitters don't hit that hard, but Magnar does. He definitely has great multipliers, and he hits very hard. The rest of his kit is not all that important. You can see what he brings. He does have a debuff spread effect, which is kind of cool. He also has this passive that heals him a little bit. It's really kind of a weak heal. And then he does have an ally defense in Doom Tower battles by 30%, which you might use. I don't know. I don't really use him in Doom Tower. I primarily would put him as like my 2nd or 3rd nuker for 3v3 arena. But you can get a lot of use out of him in the Demon Spawn faction crypt. You can even potentially consider him as a nuker for Hydra clan boss. So very good epic nuker. And really, you only need 1. Once you get your nuker that gets you to gold 5, you're pretty much done with arena nukers until you want to try to push for plat, or until you just get bored, right? So if you get Magnar, he's probably literally the easiest top tier arena nuker to get because he is just an epic, and he's not a void. So you're going to get him maybe before you get anybody else. So if he's your first great, arena nuker, you're all set. You are all set for a long time. Next is one of my all-time favorite champions. This was one of my very first epics on my very first account, and that is Seeker. Seeker is an amazing champion. In fact, Seeker is so good that Seeker does things that other champions, like no other champion in the game, can do. This is the turn meter king, absolutely and without question. More so than legendaries, this guy makes your team go. And it's all based around this A2. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 30%. Places an increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns, which is not an inconsiderable buff in certain places. And then grants an extra turn. And you're like, okay, so why is this so great? It's 30% turn meter fill. Arbiter has 30% turn meter fill. There are other champions that have 30% turn meter fill. Some that have 25% and 20%. It's like, yeah, okay. So this is on a 3-turn cooldown, but you get an extra turn, which really means that it's on a 2-turn cooldown, right? Because you're always going to get 2 turns when this goes. So that means every other turn, you are filling the entire team's turn meter by 30%. Every other turn. This is the champion that enables the fastest clan boss teams like in the game. So if you want to get as many turns in as possible, you need a Seeker somewhere. This is one of the few epics, especially the few non-void epics, where I'm like, you should build 2. Absolutely build 2 Seekers. I have 2 level 60 Seekers built. I use them for different things. I have one that is at a very specific speed for my clan boss teams and has to be there. And then I have one in Relentless gear to get even more turns that I use in other places like dungeons and Doom Tower. So it's great to have both of those options. I do not regret building 2 level 60 Seekers. Absolutely phenomenal champion. He also does some other things. He's got a provoke on his A1, which is actually quite nice and can be useful in a lot of places. I use him in my Hydra clan boss team. He also has this passive, which is nice for the arena, especially heals this champion by 20% HP and places an increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns when hit with a critical hit. You combine that with this increased defense of 30% in arena battles, and you can make him your arena lead on a go second team. He's still going to provide that turn meter increase when you need it. He's going to provide that increased attack when you need it. But because he's the lead, the way that this passive works is when he's hit, he gets hit first if he's the lead. And then he spreads like on an AoE, I mean. So the way an AoE works is it hits your leader first. Because he gets hit first, he spreads that increased defense buff to everybody else before they get hit by the same hit that hit him. So what that means is if your team gets hit by an AoE critical hit, they will all have increased defense up except for him. But he gets his 20% HP. So he's likely to survive. He's more likely to keep the rest of your team alive. And then, of course, you have the increased defense buff plus the increased defense aura going. And that means if you have a defensive-based nuker or an offensive-based nuker, because he also increases attack, you're all set. Seeker does it all. He's amazing. You can use him in arena. You can use him in arena defense. You can use him in clan boss. You can use him in Doom Tower. There is no place in the game where you'll end up running out of things to try with Seeker. He's just one of the most all-around versatile champions you can come across in the game, and he's an epic, and he's not even void. So the only weakness that is there in Seeker is that he is magic affinity, and he can weak hit. And sometimes you won't want him in certain fights because of the affinity. But otherwise, yeah, phenomenal champion. All right, number 2 is a champion you probably have all heard about already. Many of you maybe already have him, and that is Deacon Armstrong. He is a free champion that you can get with a promo code for new players. So a lot of you maybe used that promo code. He is by far my favorite epic, I think, my most used epic in the game. Even more than Seeker, I use Deacon Armstrong everywhere. Every account that I have him on, he becomes a major player. You can use him in clan boss, you can use him in dungeons, you can use him in arena, and in a lot of cases, you can use him in all those places with the same build, which is really, really great. So you don't need 2 of him like you need 2 of Seeker. You could run 2 Deacon Armstrongs. I'm not saying you couldn't, but in a lot of cases, you can just build him super, super fast. He's going to be, a speed or a lead in all battles, 19%, and he's going to do a lot of things for your team. So let's look at his kit. First of all, his A1 is a nice 2-hitter that has a chance of landing a leech. This is good against bosses, especially clan boss, where proccing War Master or Giant Slayer procs can basically heal your champions back up to full if there is a leech on the enemy. So leech is kind of like lifesteal, except it requires that you hit the enemy that has the leech debuff on them. Okay, the A2 attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance when booked of placing a decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. So the only thing you have to worry about here is weak hits. So he will occasionally weak hit against magic affinity enemies. So that's something to consider. But otherwise, you have a 100% chance of decreased defense on all enemies, which is fantastic. But the A3 is the skill that really makes Deacon so strong. So he fills the turn meter of all allies by 15% and decreases the turn meter of all allies by 15% and then grants an extra turn. This is similar to what Seeker has, right? So he gets the extra turn mechanic as well. The turn meter fill isn't as big, but he decreases enemy turn meter. Now you should know, in order to decrease enemy turn meter, that requires accuracy. But since his decreased defense also requires accuracy, you're going to want to build Deacon with accuracy. So perception sets are perfect for Deacon. You want speed, you want accuracy. If you want to go really fast, you can go with speed sets, maybe with an accuracy chest and an accuracy banner. You can go that route, but you need to make sure you have enough accuracy to land your debuffs and land your turn meter decreases. This extra turn mechanic also means that in Arena, you can open with this skill, this A3, and go right into the A2. So you actually get 2 skills for 1 at the beginning of an Arena battle, and that's incredibly powerful. So if you pair him up with Arbiter or Gorgorab, or somebody else who is a turn meter filler with an increased attack, you basically have everything you need to have the perfect setup for your Arena nukers. So amazing, amazing champion. I can't imagine a scenario where at some point you wouldn't want to build Deacon Armstrong to 6-star unless you just happen to get all these amazing legendary champions and you don't get Deacon for a really, really long time. But even then, he's going to be great in any epic support or general epic secret rooms in Doom Tower that he can go. He's amazing in the Sacred Order faction crypts. So he's great in Arena, which means even if you have to put him on like your 3rd team in Arena 3v3, he's still going to be providing value for a very, very long time. All right, and we are down to the last champion. And the last champion here actually just featured in a recent episode of Call of the Arbiter, and that is Allure. Now, I didn't get my first Allure for a very, very long time, and I knew she was good for a very, very long time because of this A1. This A1 is pretty amazing. Attacks 3 times at random. I wish it wasn't random, but it does attack 3 times at random. Decreases the target's turn meter by 25% on each critical hit. So alone, she can reduce a target's turn meter by 75% if she hits the same target 3 times, like against Fire Knight, 75% every single turn, because you can just turn off her other skills. She'll A1 constantly. She is the perfect Fire Knight champion. She's amazing against Fire Knight, obviously up to level 25, not the hard mode of Fire Knight. But I thought that was her entire kit, and there's actually more to her kit, which makes her even more of a badass. Her A2 is really great. Attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing decreased defense debuff for 1 turn. It is the smaller decreased defense, but has a chance of dropping defense for 1 turn, and then places a sleep debuff for 1 turn on targets under decreased defense debuffs. So if she lands the decreased defense, she will then put those enemies to sleep. So this is an AoE sleep. That's pretty cool. On top of the drop defense, and on top of it being a 2-hitter for all enemies. Again, even as a 2-hitter, it's pretty good against Fire Knight, so you don't have to worry too much about her AI. And if you don't have a better decreased defense on your team, she will at least bring that small decreased defense. Then she has this A3. Now, people talk about this A3 as if it's the skill that you never want to use, attacks one enemy, has an extra 30% chance of inflicting a critical hit, which is a little bit weird because you need 100% crit on her A1 anyway, so you're always going to build her with 100%. So I think this extra 30% is a waste, but will ignore 50% of the target's defense. This hits pretty hard. It's a good way if you don't want to use an AoE, if you just want to hit one target. Maybe you put everybody to sleep and you don't want to do a 3-hit random and potentially wake up 3 enemies. Now all of a sudden you can just target one champion, one enemy, one boss, and hit them decently hard. This does hit decently hard. Now you're not probably going to build her with a ton of attack or a ton of crit damage, so it's not going to be like a huge nuke. But for a support-based champion, this actually does hit fairly hard. She also has an aura which increases allies' accuracy and faction crypts by 50%. I don't know that you would use it unless you're struggling to get enough accuracy for her to land her A1. If that's the case, then maybe you would use her. She is good against wave content, so it's not like you can only use her against single targets, but obviously her A1 will be more reliable against a single target. But I use her in Doom Tower all the time. I love her A2. I use her against Dark Fae, which is a Doom Tower boss, which is pretty tricky to build a full auto team for, and she is on my full auto team for Dark Fae. So she can do a lot of work for you, and she's an amazing champion. And I would say one of, if not the best turn meter, like consistent turn meter reduction against single targets that you can get in the game, and that's why you would build her. Team her up with Armiger or Vizix or even Fenchy, and you've got a powerful combo of turn meter reduction, and that's going to allow you to free up the other 3 spots on your team to just build whatever team that is going to be most effective, rather than needing to bring in a 3rd turn meter reduction champion. She is that strong. And in fact, another epic that if you have 2 of her, probably going to want to build 2, 60s of Allure as well. Do remember that all of these champions are non-void, so they will all weak hit on occasion. If they're placing debuffs, you got to make sure that you account for that when you're putting these champions into teams, and Allure is no different. Obviously, with weak hits, the effects get negated, and so you would not get any turn meter reduction on a weak hit. And that's true for all debuffs. Okay, so that's it. 10 great, just amazing non-void epic champions who I think can help you progress. You should highly consider building any of these if you need them. Again, if you already have, let's say, a better arena nuker, maybe you don't want to build Magnar. Maybe not right now. Maybe you want to build them down the line for 3v3 arena, or maybe you want to build them down the line for faction crypt or something like that. But if you're all set with your arena nuker, you can pass on Magnar for now. Same thing is true with, if you have Tuhanarak, you don't necessarily need Doom Priest, right? So there are champions that do similar jobs, that maybe even do those jobs better, other legendaries, other epics. If you have one of those champions, then the champion on this list might not be that attractive. So always make sure when you 6-star a champion that it is providing you with value, right? Either a significant improvement over the previous champion that you had that was doing the same job, or they're literally doing a new job that nobody in your roster does. Okay, so that is it for me. I hope you found this interesting. Definitely let me know in the comments below if, one, I helped you figure something out, like, oh yeah, I'm going to build my next 6-star based on this video. Or 2, if you've already built one of these champions and you have a great story about how it helped you progress, let me know that. I love hearing those stories. My favorite stories in all of Raid are when people get a champion that they didn't know was going to transform their account. They built it, and all of a sudden they realized exactly what kind of a gem that they found and built. That's how I felt about Seeker the first time I built him. That's how I felt about Doom Priest the first time I built her. That's how I felt about Deacon Armstrong the first time I built him. So all of these champions on this list, at some point or other, the first time I built them, I was like, wow, this is a great champion. And I hope you have the same experience. Okay, that is it for me. I have been Colred. Thank you so much for joining me. If you could do me a favor, please drop a like to this video if you enjoyed the content, or better yet, subscribe to the channel. We're still in our first month. We're trying to grow the channel. We're very excited about the future here at Colred Plays, but we could absolutely use your help. So if you could do that for me, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. I will see you in another video soon.